question because the data it was trained in stopped in 2021. Okay, this discussion is 2024. But it's going to do some abstraction from all the other various data it's been fed with and give you something. So you now tell the students, now given what ChatGPT has brought back for us as a response, what do you think are the high points? Critique it. When you critique, you do the appreciation, like, okay, this is a very good answer. This is not a very good, this is a bad answer. Let's call it that way. So critique it. When they try to critique it, you act as a guide. And that leads me to the question our moderator was trying to ask, like the traditional way of teaching. The traditional way of teaching is when the teacher stands like a sage on a stage, as I am, and I begin to kind of pour knowledge into you as if you never knew anything. Now, compare that to what Socrates was doing as far back as how many ADs ago. He would assume you knew and ask you questions, probing, searching questions, so that to elicit answers from you. When the answer is not good enough, he will ask you another good question because you're inching closer and closer to it till you're able to arrive at it. So the way education is now is not for the teacher to come to class and assume that you know all. No. The students actually probably know more than you because they are far ahead of you in technological advancement and usage. But you have the experience and you have the social maturity and you probably also have the degree to be able to guide their responses. So that has changed and we also need to change. And it requires a whole lot from us as teachers to also be on top of our games, to read and to also have a lot of intellectual humility. That's such that when you see a student that is, when students know there is arrogance. In fact, they can form a clique and want to bring you down because they know, they've read. You can easily see that, but your own work as a teacher is not to puncture that. You just, stylishly ask them probing questions that would probably elicit, show to them that, okay, we should calm down in the Nigerian term, and you use that to teach them. So it has to change. We are no longer sages. If anybody still assumes that in this age, you might just be losing the students and may not be very impactful. It's rather to bring them closer, have a lot of humility intellectually. Also be open to know from them, to learn from them, and credit them when they outsmart you because they indeed do sometimes. In fact, many a times they indeed do. They will even ask you questions like, last semester when I was teaching a particular course, 105, history and philosophy of science or something, postgraduate students, very mature students were taking the course, and they asked me questions I couldn't answer. And I said, okay, and now I don't know this. You would give me time next week, I will address it, and I'll come back. And I make sure I say, okay, so this particular question, this. So there will be moments like that that you clearly do not know. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for that. I think Willa wanted to touch on something as well.
Yes, thanks, Dan, and thank you, Mtembe, for the question. And is it Sheila? Or Deep? Yeah. So I just want to add on what Dr. Ari has mentioned. In terms of, for lack of a better term, I think AI is bringing in a question of, we talk about critical thinking, but because of availability of a lot of information, I think it's an issue about comparative thinking, which builds into the critical thinking. Because we're assuming that we only have ChatGPT as the only AI tool. We have so many, and so many with different capabilities. So as to enhance performance or contribution of the human being in the tools, you don't just depend on one. Just like the same way when you have some disease that you can't get proper consultation, you always seek for second opinion, third opinion until, so it is you who's making the decision to seek for the second opinion. It's not the person who gave you. So there's an issue of how, so I think what happens is most of us use AI tools in a hurry because you are, your boss had given you a deadline of, by 2 o'clock, give me an answer. So you go quickly to whatever is available and plug in and get the answer. But the AI tools, some of them have different formats. Some of them can give you good tables, good slides, good, images. Others are just text-based. Others can, so I think the issue is compare, and there now, as you compare, you get more critical in terms of analyzing what you are analyzing and synthesizing what the information you are trying to get from the tools. From Deepo's question, if I understand it very well, I think the issue is how do we encourage, I think, the ecosystem to build our own solutions. Yes. And I think someone already alluded to this. I think it's Mtembe who asked that question to Governor when he was presenting about how do we, now that we are collecting all these data sets, encourage building of, large language models just as AI tools, basic AI, text-based AI tools. It goes three ways. One, the policy way, is the issue of encouraging the collectors of the data, the controllers and processors, to be able to develop departments or expertise to develop those solutions. Another way is to incentivize. The government can also incentivize the industry to use, I think we were talking to someone yesterday, it must have been Bugu, I think we were talking about Safaricom has a lot of data, and because of the time it has been here and how much it has collected from users. How is that data mined to be used for other things? How can the government access that data? We talk about e-citizen. How can that data be mined and be useful for planning, for example, to make sure that the government has proper planning for their citizens? So there's that policy side, but also on the academic side, we don't even have, I don't see projects. Mainstream academic guys are here. Where are those LLM projects? Where are those theses or projects in labs that are being tested that can be funded? The organization I work with, we have access to some DFIs and partners who give us some grants for research projects. We are partnered with some universities, Strathmore, Nairobi University of Nairobi, and we think this is the opportunity to create those labs that can encourage certain systems to be created, and then we work together, collaborate in terms of proposal writing to get this thing done, because we are trying to localize some of these projects to eliminate the ethical issues around biasness and incorrectness of the models that are coming out.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Just a quick addition to that question, because I think it's a very important question. I'm a firm believer in buy Kenya, build Kenya sort of thing. And I think that's why the governor's example of using local homegrown talent and building that within the ecosystem, as opposed to purely depending on knowledge transfer from outside or talent from outside, and not growing our own, so that we're not just, as I was saying, passive consumers of AI, but we're also developers of systems. And that's why it's great what Fastaga and Mutembe and team are doing. I think the other thing that incentivizes that whole ecosystem in a virtuous way is access to funding and access to contracts from government to build in AI sort of systems and tools based on local competence and local companies and startups, which then, the payments from developing those systems on behalf of government then helps those companies grow and hire more, and then that expertise continues to be built locally and in a sustainable way. So I think that's an important question.
Okay, to answer his question on harnessing the young minds, I'm a parent to a 9-year-old who is the children we have nowadays have super brains, if I can call it that. They're able to internalize a lot. They're able to research on their own. They bring very adult questions. So I think we need to have engagement, not just with the policy makers, but also have engagements with the community. Have the parents come in and create a workshop and say, we can have a boot camp for age maybe 9 to 14. Let's see their capability. Look for people who can give incentives to the young minds, and we'll have a very robust population that is good in AI and technology. So I think it's a good idea, and we need to have this rolling. because these young people are in tech, all of them, they are all in tech.
All right. I think there are a few questions. In the interest of time, we'll just pick two in case they have not been addressed, because I believe a number of things have already been addressed as we've been proceeding. So the mic can come. Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Hilary Bobo. I'll just describe myself as an AI enthusiast. I've been fooling around a lot with the ChatGPT, also PlayHT for voice cloning. I've cloned my voice, and I tell you it's unsettling sometimes, the accuracy. I also played around with the video editing software that created video from scratch. And based on what one of the panelists has just asked in terms of where are the theses, where are the projects, where are the labs, you know, that are working on our own local AI, AI systems. If we do not have those particular activities or researches going on, then we are told that Kenya, compared to the rest of Africa, is relatively doing better in terms of AI. What is it that we are looking at to say that Kenya is making some progress in AI developments? Because I believe it is a different thing for us to come here for today and tomorrow, go away and wait for nation media to organize another session next year, and we do not have, say, a local representation that people have created, and we have now, it is being now showcased, and such that, as you say that the president can do a French speech, can he do the same in Luo or in Giriama? That kind of thinking. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. There was, I see a hand here. We could just give it here, then we could draw this to a close.
Thank you very much. Joseph Nyagari from Gatsby Africa. Dr. Titilola, you know, she explained about the new approach of teaching or lecturing, but under the same time, our good governor also showcased how Murang'a County is trying to break the barriers. But if we were to do a survey, I'm sure you will find it's still a small minority. If you come to the education sector, majority are still in that traditional based. Probably even ban anything like ChatGPT anywhere near the school because they wouldn't want to be challenged or embarrassed by the students. So I'm sure there's a lot of resistance by the traditional mainstream education sector. At the same time, I'm sure there's also a lot of resistance even at county level, even at national level, to try and digitize. But everywhere we go, we find innovation is always ahead of regulation. If you wait for the regulatory framework, we will be behind. So the question I'm posing, and this could be for the big boys in the business, maybe Nation Media, what you've done, highlighting this platform is excellent. But we have the Safaricom's of this world, Nation Medias of this world. We need other forums to accelerate, whether there are competitions, challenges, we need a way to accelerate. We shouldn't wait for any regulatory frameworks. There should be safe spaces within which people can come together. In the gaming world, they do this a lot. They have hackathons and things where they bring in, you know, people ordinarily would want to hide, and they reward them for doing amazing things which ordinarily would land them in jail. So we need to figure out how do we do this? This is an open question. Maybe there could be answers there. Maybe it could be something to think about, but I'm just throwing the challenge out there.
Thank you very much. You want to respond to that? Yes, we could bring the mic here. Kenneth would respond to that.
Today was to trigger those conversations. And I remember the CS asking us, guys, what do you want to get out of this? Number one, I'm hoping that there's going to be some really bold statements that then also then go on to influence what government does. And that's why we were very invested in making sure that we've got the right government stakeholders and then the tapestry of the people who attended. The second, which we're planning to do, and we started it last year, the results were really good. If you followed us, you would have seen us going to Mulot, because we all know what Mulot stands for. They say that before Mulot, you switch off your phone, and then you pass through and you switch it on later on, because these guys are genius. So we went to Mulot, we ran hackathons, and I've been in the tech space for a while. Getting 30 devs in Mulot, in Bomet, from a density was something that was really outstanding, and they did some work which was really contextual. One of the things we take forward out of today, and Governor Kangata, I think you've raised your hand, is to say, listen, we want to do more of closer workshops to be able to figure out how then do we take this down to machine learning. So that's one of the things that we will do. And then, of course, we'll take our role. We've got a bigger mouthpiece to be able to disseminate and direct and almost like do pointers to where we want the nation to go. So I don't think these conversations are going to end today. Elements of it are going to find their way into policies that are being formed, and for us doing a catalyst role, we cannot be the all in all. Last but not least, but great to see the kind of partners that we've got today. If you saw at the bottom of the screen, the Safaricoms of this world are there. Microsoft is here, and what you'll see there's a sign there is a co-pilot, because we're working on that. And then, without blowing on trumpet, is we've been publishing since 1959. And one of the things I'm driving the business to say, listen, we've got this huge data set that we would want to be able to train to translate this, because I think this is one of the largest data sets that we had from 1959 in Swahili, publishing each and every day. Think about training a data set to just pick that up until today. We could be able to do that and more. And then finally, I was telling the business that we do not need to buy vernacular radio stations, because today I'm very invested in making sure that tomorrow you can be able to in Kisi, and you open the Daily Nation and it's able to read for you the news in Kisi, which will be what AI is giving us. So there are a lot of things that we can be able to do. I've just painted some broad strokes on some of the building blocks and what our thinking is, but also we have also come just also then to listen, because we do not know everything, and I'm thoroughly enjoying the conversations. As my pastor says, it's blessing my socks off. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kenneth, for that. And I think at that point, I'll bring this to a close. You wanted to... All right.
I'm not sure we addressed it, but I just want to say that as a form of suggestion, that if there is any organization looking to training its workforce on the use of ethical use of AI and for efficiency, take a look at the UNESCO 2023 on LLM. They have very specific chapters that you could just adopt as training modules. An institute in my school is doing that. That's one. In the previous session, a question was asked what the next thing should be after this kind of summit. And I was burning to answer that Kenya is doing well, by my own judgment, and from the index, 2023 AI index, but it can do better. I would think the next step should be to have a national AI strategy. Rwanda has. I read it, it's quite detailed, and I wished that my country will have something like that or even much better. So it would be very wonderful if that could be done. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
1 minute for me?
Yes, yes.
Just 1 minute to respond to Hillary and James, and I think Ken just speak to the words from my mouth, but what I wanted to say is these things need to be deliberate from the corporate side, which I think I'm happy that national media is already doing. When OpenAI started, it was not a Microsoft product. When Bard started, it was not a Google product. What happened? You all know how many billions these guys put in to develop it. So it requires the resources. They put in a lot of billions. I don't have the numbers of it, but all of us read. So it needs deliberate effort. So I like what you're saying, partnership with other corporates, that this project that someone like Hillary is doing, James is talking about, you went to Mulot, how do you sustain that? How do you have corporates coming together, setting up an AI fund that is going to, like you said, we only have, if I use, I profess Christianity, we only have, I think, about 20 Bibles translated in Kenya. We can use this tool to translate all the Bible in all the languages in Kenya and Africa using AI, but it needs investment. So it has to be deliberate and it has to be sustainable, and corporates actually call this in. And of course, looking at also what the countries are doing and building in that program. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And let's give our panelists a round of applause. Thank you to Ken Mwenda, co-founder and managing director of Immobilis. Next to him, we have Titilola Olojede, PhD, from the National Open University of Nigeria. We also have Dr. Ellen Kamau, founder and managing director of Vista Prime Solutions Limited. And we have William Baraza, the director of the African Advanced Level Telecommunications Institute, that's AFRALTI. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your insight, which, as you have seen, cannot be quenched in this one serving. But I'll invite you to have your seats, and I'll call some regs so that we can prepare to go for lunch. I'd like us to stretch for a bit as we head for lunch. To appreciate them. Please help us stand up and go to lunch.
Hi, everyone. Just give me a minute. So, as you digest the information that you've been given, I'd like us to also create room for physical digestion. So I'd like us to just stand, and we're going to do a bit of stretch, musically speaking. And then after this will be a very short one because I know we have another session in the afternoon, so I don't want to keep you guys for long. So I'd like you to, before we start, just stretch a bit. Just stretch a bit. Awesome. Some people probably the last time they stretched was 2020 something. So now I'm going to ask my DJ to play some music, and then we're going to, most of the moves you guys have already done, so we're just repeating it. Remember, the idea is to stretch. So we'll do a few moves with the hands, a few moves with the legs, and that. Let's also give a hand to all the panelists who have done an amazing job. And also to Dan Mwangi, who, you know, the MCs are rarely appreciated. So let's give a hand to Dan Mwangi for taking us so well today.
Thank you very much. So now it's time to go and have our lunch. Where we had dinner last night, there's a tent next to their place. So you will be guided in the event that you may get lost, but you won't. Trust me, your hunger will make you find the way. All right? It is now, what's the time? Could we kindly meet here at exactly 2:40? Kindly. 2:40. It is now 1:42, so I'm giving you 58 minutes. 20 minutes 3. Yes. Eh? 2:30. Make it 2:30. Or watu wakule haraka lakini wasinyongwe. Let's meet here at 2:30 after your lunch. Then we can have our final sessions for the day. Your food is blessed. Thank you.
power of cutting-edge technologies to drive progress and prosperity. The theme of this forum couldn't be more timely or relevant. We have gathered here today and yesterday to delve into the myriad of AI use cases that are reshaping industries and redefining the possibilities of what can be achieved. As we embark on this journey of exploration and discovery in this forum, let us keep an open mind, embrace collaboration, and strive to unlock the full potential of artificial intelligence for the benefit of humanity. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being a part of this extraordinary event. Let us pave the way for a future where the possibilities and opportunities are boundless. Close quote. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe, and we are glad we could provide a platform to launch your campaign. Thank you very much for that. And I think without much ado, I'll now invite Lydia, my son, to come and take us through the next conversation. She will ably introduce it as well as call up her panelists. Over to you.
Good afternoon. Hasn't Dan been doing a great job? Can we give him a hand? I've always wanted to do that as a school teacher. So yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome again to this afternoon session. The topic that we'll be talking about today is data-driven decision-making and ethical implications or considerations in AI. Before bringing my panel on, I'd like to reflect a little bit. So in today's age, as we've heard earlier today, data reigns supreme as the currency of innovation. It drives our every move. It shapes the future of industries worldwide. But what does that mean for Africa? What does that mean in the Kenyan context? What is data to us? What do we collect? How do we collect it? And when we do collect it, how do we store it? What is the state of our data banks? What is the health of it? So as we're having this discussion today, as you listen to us and interact at the end, please keep these basics in mind. I'm Lydia Biarugaba-Maison. I am the head of product at Nation Media Group, and I'll be moderating this session. There's two thematic areas that I'd like us to cover today. So we've broken that up into governance and transparency. We will navigate through the contextual risks and challenges within industries. We will look at private sector and public sector collaboration, but we will also look at protection. What does that actually mean? The second area that is key and very pertinent to this topic is diversity and inclusion. So our experts will explore what does gender bias and stereotype bias mean in the development of AI, the one that we currently are using, and how do we address that discrimination? Please join me in welcoming our esteemed panelists on stage. I'll kick us off with Rosemary Koech-Kimwatu. She is the head of data protection at KCB Group. Rosemary is a tech lawyer, and in pursuing a career, she sought out to be relevant and impactful. To this end, prior to joining law school, Rosemary completed an IT diploma. Her career has found an intersection at tech and law across various firms, and with no precedents navigating tech policy, she, an early adopter, helped forge that path and continues to do so in her current role. An achievement that Rosemary holds dear to her is becoming an IVLP Fellow. That's International Visitor Leadership Program. And the year that she was part of, the topic was Advancing an Open, Reliable, and Secure Digital Economy. Rosemary loves to bake, and she loves to experiment in the kitchen, and she said that this year is the year to conquer the cheesecake. Welcome. Next up, we have Sharola Akoth Odipo. She is the founder of Women in Intelligence Africa. Sharola is a lawyer by profession, and she runs a law firm with a leaning towards tech law and policy development. Having done some pro bono work for marginalized groups, particularly women, She founded Women in AI Africa to address the bias gaps that we experience on the continent. Close to heart is motherhood. Sharola looks to craft better and safer experiences for her daughters to thrive by advocating for women's rights. Sharola loves music, and currently on her playlist is John Jr., who does Ohangla music. Welcome. Next on, we've got Mercy Omolo. Mercy is the president of ISACA Kenya. She is also a risk, compliance, and audit executive, overseeing IT and operational risk at Liberty Life Kenya. ISACA, of which Mercy is the second female president in its 24 years of existence, is a group of digital trust professionals that builds capacity for those in the IT sector. A fun fact about Mercy is she's a sports junkie. So Mercy played basketball through primary and high school. She represented Kenya in professional hockey as well. Welcome. And last but certainly not least, we have the gentleman of the group, Hartnell Ndungi. He's a chief data officer at ABSA Group. Hartnell is the first to hold this role across East and Central Africa. As a coder, he transitioned into the data space and started his journey in consulting and transitioned into being a specialist in data, analytics, business intelligence within the financial service industry. A self-confessed polymath, Hartnell pursues knowledge with passion. He recruited and trained the first cohort of data specialists in Kenya and has over 150 data certifications. He's an active investor in startups. He's founded a few himself and is always on the lookout for the next innovation. A father of 2 boys and a lover of travel, he enjoys heading down to the coast, his birth home, with his family. Welcome, Hartnell. Thank you. I welcome you all as the audience to please participate, so note your questions as we'll address these at the end of the session. And join us as we explore this delicate balance, I would say, between tech advancement and the ethical responsibility tied to it. So Rosemary, maybe to kick us off, effectiveness of AI often hinges on the large volumes of personal data, right? So if the data that you have is not large, then you've already created a bias. I want to ask the question in 3 parts. Do you think we collect the right data? Do you think we collect the data right? And then lastly, if we do those 2 things, could you share some ethical principles that organizations could apply?
Thank you very much. You know, when they come in 3 parts, you have to make sure that you write them down. Otherwise, I'll ask you, which was the first one? But to do your question justice, I think that's a very good question because it lays the foundation for our discussions. AI, big data, machine learning, all that is based on the adoption of huge amounts of data sets. And most importantly, we've talked about even personal data. And on to your first question, do we collect the right data? I am a firm believer that as Africans, we are from a very data-rich continent. However, the biggest challenge is that we've not shed the light on what our data capabilities are and what sheds the light. And this is done through collecting the right data. So we may be late starters into the game, so to speak. But it also gives us a very good opportunity because we have an opportunity to adopt it right, to get it right in the first place. Unlike other places, say in the Western world, where AI models have been used to even check how water is going, how is electricity used, how then can we have cultural context, which then speaks to the right thing? What is the right data? The right data will mean, can we collect things that are contextual for us? I spoke to one of us here who said that he has a barber client, and he was able to train his models on assisting this person to know who's your biggest customer, who's your most frequent customer. What I'm saying is that the right data is going to be that data that is contextual to solve the problems that we face today in our day-to-day basis. Otherwise, it just becomes an abstract conversation. Then are we collecting data right? Sometimes, most of the time, no. The challenge is that we have not embedded what is basically the foundation of data governance. In terms of you collect the data, how do you store it? How do you classify it? What do you do with it? Such that then, by the time you're building AI models, by the time you're training an algorithm, what then is it going to feed off of? So you must collect the right data, collect the data right. And the beauty about it is that, look, we're getting all these models that have been developed elsewhere. We have a burden on us to make sure that we build models that work for us, but it only works if you get the basics right. Then now the final part, of course, is the ethical part. I think herein, and you mentioned it, there's a bias if you don't collect enough. There's a bias if maybe you use minimum data. I think for us, what we should be thinking, at what point do we have, where do we start, where do we regulate, at what point, and I really didn't want to use this word regulate, because not where we should be going, but at what point do we train ourselves? Even as we're learning to use AI, as we're learning to develop products, to build things, how then are we putting pauses between ourselves and how we utilize the data to observe people's rights in terms of privacy? And we know that AI can do things that we don't understand why. And one of the key issues is what? Explainability. When an AI model takes up in just a lot of information and makes decisions which you cannot trace back, then creates a context, and not just a context, but even a tension between using AI and balancing the rights of those who need to use those services. And that then becomes very heavy questions that we need to think about at the back of it. But do we need it? Yes. Do we have real-life problems? Yes. And what do we need to use it for? For things that are going to be largely impactful for us, not just as Kenyans, as Africans. And right from solving societal problems, but even basic things. I work for a financial institution. Even having the true value of what our economies are. Sometimes they're abstract values. But if you sit down and work with a number of MSMEs and do proper numbers, proper analytics of their data, will then shed light on what we then can put ourselves out as this is who we are, this is our real data story. And that's it from me.
Thank you. That was quite an elaborate answer. And I think you touched on a few things: data security, compliance. You talked about the ethical implications of it. I'll pass it on to you, Mercy, and maybe to double click on the data security element. So there's this balancing scale where on one end, a business wants to make data-driven decisions based on insights that they've elicited. And then on the other end, you've got, I need to be concerned with protection of first-party data. I need to secure it. How should organizations juggle that?
All right. I think I'll take you a few years back before COVID and before the Data Protection Act came into operations. At that time, companies more or less had leeway in terms of what they would do with customers' data or data subjects' data. And many companies weren't taking advantage of that. Until now, when the Act came into place, and then everyone is now trying to see what can we do with this data, but within the confines of the law. And right now, we have more or less moved into the digital transformation era, and your leadership, your management, your board of directors are pushing organizations to ensure that we are utilizing that data. Because, of course, the term that data is the new oil, but are we mining the data? What are we using that data for? And so organizations don't have a choice but to show value or demonstrate what they're doing with that data, to be able to ensure that there are insights that you're even giving your board of directors to be able to ensure that they're making decisions with that. So not just doing the Power BIs. I mean, Power BI is a good tool, can give you great visual dashboards and all, but at the end of the day, is it helping you to make decisions? Is it helping you to, is that data that you're getting from Power BI helping you to mine or make management decisions? But then now on the flip side, because of the investment that you're making in this data, you also have to make sure that you're making sure that the confidentiality of this data, the integrity of this data, the security of this data is secure, that you're able to demonstrate to regulators, you're able to demonstrate to your shareholders that the data that you have in relation to your business is in safe hands. And so with that comes now investment again into technology, into security. And you cannot buy your way into digital transformation without great leadership and the right culture. And that means that the leadership of organizations has to invest in the right skills, it has to invest in the right technology, it has to invest in the right tools. And more or less, if you look at it in hindsight, it's the governance practices that you have for data security and privacy. So there'll be the technology aspect and there'll be the privacy aspect that Rosemary has touched on. But when it comes to the technology aspect, what kind of people are you employing in your innovation hubs? What kind of people are you employing in your security division to be able to ensure that you have the right people to be able to ensure that you have proper controls to be able to secure your data. But over and above that, if you don't invest in your skills, a good example, if you don't invest in your people skills towards your staff, then you won't be able to move in the right direction in terms of digital transformation. So a good example is like the governor that we had in the morning, and the investment that he took into the students, and you can see the good work that they've done into the country. So at the end of it all, I think it's more of a balance and investment in terms of your staff, your skill set, as well as ensuring as well that you're respecting the law. Yeah.
Thank you, Mercy. You touched on people and training them with the right skills, but this morning CJ also mentioned that it's important that we look at the other side of the person, right? So the soft skills around their moral values, their ethical standing. So Hartnell, to bring you in there, if you could just touch on the transparency and accountability part to stakeholders that a good leader or a good leader of an organization would need to do. If you could talk to that, but also on the other side that Mercy alluded to on people, beyond the hard skills that they need, what would the soft skills be?
So thank you so much for those two questions. Now, starting off with the skills part, I think it's very important to just note that we all talk about AI and data, but I'm sometimes very worried when you talk about hardcore AI skills. Now, if you look at some of the tools we are all now happy to consume, ChatGPT, we now have open source versions of Llama, Mistral. The people are able to actually download and do something creative with some of these models. We actually have very few people who have the niche skills to know exactly how to operate or even configure some of these AI models. And I know we are sitting mostly on the consumer side, but if you look at it, if you're actually going to solve the issue of explainability of models, AI actually puts the risk at a very high level because when you're talking about simple dashboard creations and visualizations, it's very easy for you to understand why a trend is the way it is. But when you're looking at some of the tools we are using where you just write in a question and it goes and reads more than 10,000 books and is able to give you an answer that is actually collated by concatenating different types of inputs and contexts, then we have to think about how will we be able to harness some of these capabilities locally. A good story I can share with you about skills is that I lost one of my top head of AI to a competitor, a neighbor. I don't want to look at that table, is there in here. But for me to actually replace this person, I actually had to go to the UK and get a Kenyan to relocate back to the country. So the head of AI actually had to change his lifestyle to come and work for us. But you see the kind of work we've been able to do in less than a year is that we've actually been able to create our own version of a large language model. In the back right now, I know we have more than 1,000 different policies and procedures. Nobody actually goes, I'm sure in all your organizations, how many people have read a policy in the last 2 days? I'm sure you're an auditor. The auditors only, yeah. But people don't read policies. And again, these are the guiding frameworks and principles that people look at for them to conduct business in a safe manner. So what we were able to do is actually go in and create a large language model that went and took all the content from more than 1,000 policies. And now for you to know anything in the policy, anything and everything, you just chat with the model. So how simple is that? Go to any of your allowed devices, go in and chat. But the biggest question that I've been unable to answer is how does it work? So trying to explain to someone that we had to open up one of the open source large language models, We had to do something called RAG and context embedding, and we have to really configure it to be able to work within our servers. We had to build a new user interface. It worries me about the skills. But that's more on the hardcore. On the softer side, I'm happy that most business colleagues are actually adopting AI as a tool that can actually transform businesses. So data literacy has actually gone up. Previously, I remember when you were starting all this in 2014, 2018, we had to go and train people who owns data. I remember we had a very big deck that had 38 slides about who owns data. But these days, people are actually speaking about data. People are actually able to know exactly how data fits within their role. So we have to remember that when you're actually building some of these solutions, we have to work with the business people. It's easier for us now that people are more literate, that we can co-create solutions better, and it's helping people with actually knowing exactly how to use them and how to support development and deployment of AI solutions. Your second question was touching on how can you actually be able to get a better view on explainability, and also touches a bit about ethics in how data is used. When you think about ethics, and I think one of the speakers mentioned about what we do about ethics within our organization. I'll give you a story about a paper I read, and actually it's a case study. 2019, when you're thinking about ethics, that's the time when COVID was a fresh out of 2020, late 2020. And I remember people had a challenge of getting machines that could actually support their lungs. And what happened is that in Italy, some professors were given a task to determine who required the machine to support their lungs and their hearts at that time. And what they went and did is that they built a model. They went and took data about all the different patients in an hospital, and they said, we are able to come up with a model that will be accurate in predicting who is actually going to need a life support machine. Now, what the model did is that it actually predicted that younger people require the machines more than older people. You know why? It's because of bias. Obviously, if you are old, you are nearing to your death than if you're younger. So it was showing that people who are between the ages of 18 to 30 were actually the ones who are supposed to be supported more. And that's a very simple example of allocation bias. Now, we have more than 30 different types of biases. When we look at the life cycle of how you develop AI models, you are able to introduce bias at every given point. From simple things as what topic you decide to build a solution around in AI. From simple things as how you coin a problem to how you select data. Last week I was having a problem of a model that was trying to determine who gets a loan and who doesn't get a loan. But my scientists who trained the data looked at people who are actually not qualifying for loans than people who are qualifying. So your data set has more people who are obviously never going to get loans, and you end up actually using that data to create a model to predict who gets a loan, and you get it all wrong. So you have multiple types of bias. There's selection bias, there's fitting bias. What I should tell people is that you have to have the right kind of guardrails that help people, number one, understand what biases are. So in our literacy programs, we are going around the bank and teaching branch managers, tellers, on understanding a simple concept like bias. That's the first thing you do. Second thing we are doing is that we're creating walls and actually gates to check what biases might have been introduced at different parts of how we are actually using our analytics and our data. Then there's a different team that is a data governance and management team, which comes in and actually checks that we're not introducing biases across the development and rollout of solutions. So these things are actually very realistic to us because we know exactly the harm that can be caused if we just keep on developing models. We do more than 300 in a year. If we just keep on developing models and giving them to business to use without really knowing that you're not really creating a selection problem or an allocation problem, then you actually are supposed to be very responsible when you're actually doing this kind of work to get it right. Thanks.
Thank you, Hartnell. Sharola, to bring you in there, Hartnell touched on the biases, right? There's multiple, but what I'd like us to maybe focus on is gender and stereotype biases. But before I even do that, I think what you've illustrated really well, Hartnell, is that data is to AI what blood is to human beings. And so if you have the wrong kind of data or too little, the algorithms will be biased, which means the AI will be biased. So maybe what you could do is tell us, how do these biases, how do we identify them? How do organizations identify them, and how can they address them?
Testing, okay. Thank you so much, Lydia. And I like the way the conversation is just growing and flowing. And just as Hartnell has mentioned, bias is one of the major ethical issues. And to respond to your question, there are various ways of identifying bias throughout the life cycle of an AI system. For instance, when you look at data scrutiny, because data is blood of AI, basically. When you're able to scrutinize the composition and the source of data, where did this data come from? Did it come from a source that has, underlying and prehistorical biases that existed in the past? And what is it composed of? Was it obtained from a diverse, kind of system, diverse groups? So that is one of the ways in which you're able to identify whether an AI system has bias or what type of bias it has or any such thing. And also algorithmic audits. I think this is something that we need to adopt, whereby when we have existing algorithms that we already have, we do not know how we were able to obtain them. A friend of mine shared about how most of the time in the global north, they're able to develop, come try and test it in Africa, only for it to go and be used back. Then you need to test and see and audit and question the entire process from data collection all through programming, implementation throughout, and see whether there are points in which you're able to pinpoint and see that there's bias and identify whether there's bias and how to go about it. I think we can also use testing. There are different ways of testing data using various diverse groups. We can introduce maybe through sampling of various diverse groups to just try and see how they would give us feedback and how they would respond to systems that we're using, to algorithms, just to see whether they're able to identify that there's a bias or that there is none. And to answer your second question on how to go about it and how to address it. So there are various debiasing techniques. We can look at an example of maybe data augmentation, there is data cleansing, and this mostly works for algorithms or data sets that are already in existence. This is for data sets that have already been collected, algorithms that have already been developed. You can just take a look and see whether you're able to use data augmentation or data cleansing to just try and get and read the algorithm off of the biases that are already in existence. And if we look at algorithms that are being developed, just when you're starting, when you're making that decision to build an algorithm, so what is your source? What design are you using? Are you using designs that are, like you mentioned, there are designs that are supervised and supervised learning has been used to develop the algorithm. And you see, maybe if supervised learning was used, then they are trained in nature, and this training can bring about some type of bias based on the type of training that was introduced, that was brought about. And so when you're selecting your algorithm, you need to look at that. You need to look at the system that you're bringing up. And also when you're developing it, you could use maybe reinforcement learning for these systems, through human feedback. So you get feedback. This is whereby you get feedback from people and you use it to develop this algorithm so that it's more accurate, more cultural, embracing and all that. And then I think one other way of addressing these biases would be to ensure that there is oversight. I think this has been mentioned initially, to ensure that there's human oversight and explainability, just as Rosemary put it. You don't give a system too much autonomy, because then there's no accountability, there's no transparency. Who are you going to apportion this, responsibility of ensuring that there's oversight throughout this life cycle, from the data collection point all the way to implementation? We need to have human oversight, and we need to ensure that there's explainability at every given step. And now also another way to deal with it would be to have diverse teams. the teams that you're using to develop these algorithms, the teams that are working through this life cycle, the actors, even in the initial stages, are they from diverse groups, or are you just using, depending on the target market, the target consumers of this algorithm, are you using diverse groups that address the, the problem that this system seeks to address? And when you have diverse groups from different demographics, you get good feedback, you get proper feedback that will, one person may be able to pinpoint, another wouldn't. So when you have diverse groups of people working on it, I think it goes a long way in mitigating this issue of bias and all that. And then just generally, once a system has been rolled out, it's just good to make sure that you have this continuous assessment, just to make sure there are checks and balances, and to improve it according to these assessments that you conduct periodically to ensure that you're at par. Now, you mentioned gender, and I think gender comes at the intersection of all the other digital let me use digital polycrisis, as Siobhan had brought up initially. They all intersect at the same place. The ethnic groups. It's not just about gender, but we can talk about gender and how we can promote and be very intentional even with our data to ensure that the bias is not there. But it works, it cuts across to all ethnicity, races, and any other group that feels like they're underrepresented in these systems. So if we're able to be intentional, and if we just go about it in these identifying ways and sorting it out through these various ways that we have identified today, then I think we'll have gone a long way in mitigating this bias issue. Yeah.
Thank you, Sharola. Rosemary, if we were to bring it back to privacy of the individual and what their rights are, Sharola has touched on, and herself and Hartnell have both touched on teams, and more so on the side of working on the algorithms, right? That those teams should be diverse. And that could be a consideration when looking at the protection of the individual rights. Are there any other institutional or societal considerations that you think we should look at when we're looking at protecting the rights of the individual?
I think at this point, you always need to go back to the data basics. And these are the usual principles that were set out. The challenge with the data protection laws, they didn't know what was coming. Data protection laws were set to form a buffer between human beings. You can hear me? Yeah, between human beings and machines. But only at the point of where we gave instructions to machines and they gave us responses, they gave us products, they gave us solutions. In comes AI, where a machine is thinking by itself. So already there's a tension, because now the usual rights that are there, for example, data accessibility by data subject. The example Hartnell gave, you've put policies in an AI model. Now supposing you put your core banking data, and a data subject gives an access right request. Do you know where that data has gone? Do we understand maybe who else has access to it? Then issues like even purpose limitations. When we give an AI information, data, so to speak, and these are not because they are bad things. We will use AI, but these are the reflections we have at the back of our mind. Things like purpose limitation. We gave it to give us an audit on whether somebody, they're creditworthy or they're not. Supposing it's taken now to do something else that we hadn't done. And this now speaks to the biases, the things that you can't explain, the black boxes in AI. Then, of course, data minimization. Data minimization is another tension. You've put it very well. We need so much so that we can build better products. But then how then do we exercise things like data minimization, which is an absolute right? How then do we manage that? Then, of course, issues like accuracy. Accuracy becomes an issue. You want your data to be accurate at any one point, yet AI has been known to hallucinate. So at any one point, it's always a paradox. Another one is storage limitation. Data protection laws came to tell you that you can only store this data for this amount of time, at which now there's a right to be forgotten. Can somebody prove to me that AI can forget data? So what happens now to those rights that we've set out as laws, even in this country? Then, of course, the other one is security and accountability, which I think I've covered earlier. So it's basically the usual data protection principles. And I think Reuters has called it an insatiable need for ingesting data. That's how AI has been described in many ways. So there's no real solution to your question. It's about asking ourselves, how then do we create guidelines? Because again, you can't start regulating strictly, because you'll stop yourself before you can advance. So how then do we create guidelines for even things like, how do you do a data protection impact assessment on an AI platform? How then do you do privacy and digital rights assessments on AI platforms? How then do we bring the things that we know into a system that we know a bit about, can do a lot for us, and balancing those tensions while at it? So many times it leaves more questions than answers, but they're good resources. I think like the ICO in the UK has already set a number of guidelines for AI. We have the working group that's in Kenya that's setting up. We're really interested to see what comes out of that. But basically, helping us benefit from AI, but at the same time, balancing the rights and obligations that we have towards the data subjects, who are the primary owners of the data that we're ingesting into these systems. And at the same time, as I said, it's a data opportunity for us. How then do we ingest so that we can do good things, so that we can tell our story? So that's the answer is tension.
Yes, and I think it's a continuous conversation that needs to happen. And looking at organizations such as APSA, Hartnell, where you have already set on your way towards putting policies in place, putting structures in place, with what Rosemary has just shared, and your role cutting across, cultural nuance, probably different regions, different ways of interacting with this data. How have you then made the guidelines that you have equitable and inclusive for the customer set that you deal with?
Thank you for the two questions. Okay, the first one, I want to just chime in from what Rosemary said. This is about privacy. And I think the government is doing very well to the Data Protection Commissioner's office, yeah? There's only one problem I'm seeing, and I usually ask myself, when you look at risk versus reward, do you go and support implementation first, then you come and check, or do you release the law and come and check immediately? And why I say that is because I see the struggles on ground. If you look at the laws, not only for the Kenyan laws, but also for GDPR, they are very strict about ensuring that the people you share your data with, your suppliers, are actually also compliant to data protection and privacy laws. But to date, I usually see some suppliers struggling. They don't understand exactly the role that data privacy plays. You have to really handhold them. And I'm actually getting a new task now of making sure we no longer just look at the guidelines on how they affect us and our customers, but we also now play a community role, whereby we also go and help people who are dealing with us to understand and implement the laws. So that's the first problem. Second problem I have, actually the education level or the literacy that we expect from data subjects. So the very good laws we have come out with, but how many people like writing their names in those guide books? Now with the Airbnb becoming a menace in Kenya, you now leave your physical ID. And some people even take your photos, yeah? So I'm actually seeing that there's a role that we have to really start playing as professionals and corporates. How can we ensure that we take up the role of educating the data subject? I think it's missing. And we want the commissioner to do it, but it requires a lot of work. It requires a lot of capacity. But if we can actually be able to see exactly how we also take part in ensuring that our subjects, our customers, understand what the law requires of them and what rights have been given to them, then I think we'll actually move a bit quicker with regards to data privacy and protection. With regards to how we are doing it in ABSA, to ensure that we have equitable allocation, it's not a matter of actually gender only, but also looking at exactly the different classifications of customers that we have. How we do it is that, number one, there's something called the 4/5 rule, which ensures that you're not introducing bias when you're looking at segregation or classification models. So a simple example is that even if you have a minority population, any kind of solution that you actually give to the majority, you should have an equal proportion in the minority. So it's not about having an equitable allocation based on I have to have one person. It's similar to the 2/3 rule, whereby when you say I have in this population of customers who are termed premier, more women than men, then if I look at the proportion of solutions given to the women, it should be an equal proportion of solutions given to the men. But other than that, I think giving the knowledge out there that these are things we're supposed to be looking out for also helps us to be called out. I should tell business counterparts that we need to tell you what you're supposed to do right, so that when you see us not doing it right, you actually call it out. So when you're looking at some of our models that look at how do we actually recommend the next best product, something as simple as that actually touches on fairness. Because somebody will come, and I had an example of a case whereby somebody came and said, my twin brother is actually getting an additional credit card limit, and I'm not getting. So you start asking yourself, okay, I think twin is one thing, maybe you do more transactions than the other person, but it brings an aspect of fairness. How do you ensure that people understand where fairness does not apply and where it actually applies? So we actually go around and educate. We have a literacy program that ensures that most people have a platform they can go and learn about different data concepts and elements, from visualization to ethics to privacy. And when people are actually aware of what you're trying to achieve as KPIs, then they can call you out, and that helps you to actually achieve them right. Thanks.
Thank you, Hartnell. So Mercy, Hartnell has shared some strategies that they employ at ABSA Group. Do you have any others that you would share with an organization that is based in Kenya, based on the continent, that helps them uphold these ethical standards and ensure that there's human dignity?
Yeah, maybe just to piggyback on the literacy programs. At the end of the day, the end users who are going to use the systems or the tools that are built on this AI have to be involved in the process. So tailoring programs to be able to ensure that the end user understands this is the type of tool that we are using. But over and above that, the people supporting or developing the AI tools. So ISACA, as an organization, we have a certification in emerging technology that we do, and it doesn't need you to have technology background. It's a basic certification, and the principle behind it is on emerging technologies and not specifically AI, because in a few years' time, we're going to be looking at probably quantum computing. That's coming up as the next emerging technology. So the certification helps build that foundation of emerging technology principles, and that's a good certification that I can advocate for organizations to be able to upskill their staff. But over and above that, I think at the end of the day, you have to do community empowerment in terms of the user who is using this AI tool. So let's take an example of the registrar of marriages. So you can imagine a scenario where a couple has gone to apply for a marriage license, and they are told, so they give out their data, they're asked several questions, and they're asked, and then they're told, okay, we've checked, the AI tool has told us, no, you guys are going to be divorced in 3 years' time, so let's not waste the government's time. You guys shouldn't get married. What biases or what ethical standards were used when they were developing that? Did they factor in probably maybe other divorcees in that process? Did they factor in the fact that maybe, yes, you've been in and out of relationships or the like? So you have to involve the user, the end user, at the end of the day in that process. It doesn't make sense for you to build a tool, say, for a mama mboga to use, and for mama mboga to use, let's say, to be able to ensure that she's reminding her customers, or she knows every 2 weeks this and this customer needs onions, these tomatoes, but you're going to use the target market of upscale wealthy, affluent clients. At the end of the day, maybe her customers are more or less other mama mbogas or other middle class or lower class families. So you have to make sure that you're tailoring it to them and bring them with you in that journey. I think the other thing is on diverse and building diverse teams that are able to ensure that if you're building your models, so like in Hartnell's case, I don't know if he has, maybe if they're targeting a product for females and it's a credit facility program, does he have females on his team that are able to maybe look at nuances that probably a man wouldn't look at or wouldn't think of, that maybe a female developer or a female AI technology person is able to pick up, maybe just because she's a female. So building teams that are diverse and diverse doesn't mean necessarily gender, but also the age factor, different classes of life, I think is also useful.
Thank you, Mercy. So I think what I'm hearing is, oh, sorry.
No, you'll allow me to answer. Yes, there are females in the team who actually get involved. Actually, with a team of around 36 to 40 people, we have a 50-50 gender balance. So at least we make sure that some of those solutions that are actually going to target women and customers who deal with gender-based products, we actually have the ladies actually leading this kind of conversation. Thanks.
Nice, thanks.
Thanks for that. Good to clarify, because you said we should hold you to account. I think what I'm also hearing that you're saying a lot, Mercy, is contextualize, contextualize, contextualize. So as we bring it to a close, Sharola, before we open it up to the audience, as Africans, we have shared values, right? We have a lot of similarities. Granted, we are different communities across the continent, but they're core values that sit with us. How do we ensure that these societal values and cultural values play into the decision-making that will happen outside of just, the biases that we've addressed already?
Okay, I think, Lydia, this is something that has been discussed by most people today, contextualizing, just like you have mentioned. We can't be obtaining, having systems that we are using in Africa that are based off of data sets that have been collected, let's say, from the global north. We have to reach a point where we are using our own data sets. We are creating data sets that are alive to our norms, our cultures. And this is not really about, we can't narrow it down to language alone. Norms are not just language. Norms are how we go about things. For instance, just to mention the EU Act, the EU AI Act that passed the other day, worked very well for them. They have this surveillance and identification system that they work on, but they use it also on immigrants, no questions asked. Is that okay? Is that okay for the immigrants? Is it okay for where they come from? Does it sit well with them? So we have to come up with systems that are alive to us. And before we even get into the cultural norms, have we dealt with the basic things that we need to deal with as Africa, as we are adopting this innovative development and growth? Have we dealt with the gaps, the clear gaps that we have? I like the way the CS pointed out that they're dealing with ensuring that there is connectivity. So that goes a long way to speak about the internet gap and to make sure that there's awareness, over and above what we currently have. So when that is done, then we are able to go all the way to Samburu, to everywhere. When we are talking about having societal norms and cultures that are alive to us, we're not talking about urban areas. We are including rural areas. We are including Kenya. We are including Africa as a continent. So even as we are developing, let us consider having data that is alive to us, alive to our context, and growing with us at our own pace. Yes.
Thank you. I hear a lot of Ubuntu in what is being shared on stage today, which basically means I am because you are. So if we do it as Africans, if we do it together, we're equipped, we have what we need to do it. I'll open it up for any questions before I get closing remarks from the panelists. Are there any questions? There's one there. There's one at the back as well.
So thanks so much to everyone on the panel. So a lot of our conversation so far has been on the enterprise, on private sector companies. But as always happens, especially with Africa, we're largely, in terms of the capital that comes into the continent, besides our diaspora, is actually development aid, right? And now everyone is talking about AI for good, AI for development. What are some of the risks that you see when AI now is applied to humanitarian situations, conflict situations, famine, Because this is now becoming more and more prevalent of now applying it here. And so what are some of your thoughts about the considerations of ethics in that sense?
Thank you. Let's take the second question.
Okay, good afternoon. I am Stella Rotich from Bomet. I think I have a question on disinformation. I know ethical consideration comes around with the with the disinformation. We have very many people currently using the social space to spread a lot of information, and it's really hard to. I know in the past we've been able to manage because we know there are these media houses that they can validate before it's shared. What are some of your recommendations on how, because it's becoming like maybe it's a space where it can be used for competition, where somebody's bringing in disinformation about another one and another one, another one. So which is a really big challenge. What are some of the things that we can do to handle disinformation? Thank you.
Thank you. We have another question at the front here.
Thank you. So when we talk about data and using that to make decisions, I think over and above the different use cases one might think about, there is this overriding idea of the nature of information you collect based on the people that are probably likely to give that information or they are likely to get information from, raising the question of things that are popular or things that most people seem to want. Certainly from a customer, for example, perspective, that is an important thing. But things that most customers seem to want may not necessarily be the best things. So I'm just wondering where the place of the wider public interest, wider public good sits in a context where these machines are telling us things and we're saying these are the things that people want, give them what they want, but what they want, is that really necessarily what is the right? So where is the place where you say, yes, many people might want this, but there is also the greater good of society that then one needs to think about. And I'm just wondering, what are some of the big blocks one begins to think about in terms of looking at drawing a line where you begin to say where that balance tips over in favor of the public good?
Thank you, Joe. Any of the panelists are welcome to answer.
Okay. I can start with the last one. Maybe the answer, and it's one of the ethical considerations when you're building AI model, the kill switch button. At that point when machines are fed wrong things and they keep leading you towards making wrong mistakes, that can even affect us. Can you imagine AI in warfare, AI even in humanitarian standards, giving you biased data that makes you give food aid to one section and not another? So one of the early considerations in AI and even training those models is, at what point, it's just simple, at what point do you just switch off the lights on these systems? And that's where, in terms of protection from automated decision making, which is one of the rights that are required, how then do we come in as human beings to make sure that we're the last line of defense? I know it sounds very sci-fi, like a movie, but it's the honest truth that sometimes the answer is, how do you just switch it off?
I think also, just to add on to what Rosemary has said in response to your question, I think the aspect of human oversight, and I believe the panels that were before us were able to always bring us back to that aspect of humanity, that we are supposed to work in collaboration with AI and just not to give it the, just autonomous kind of decision making and decide that what it says is what goes. We remain with the power, we remain with the supervisory role for these elements in the entire life cycle of this AI system. So I think that gives us some power, like we hold back some of that power, just as Rosemary has mentioned.
I can chime in there, still on the same question. The good thing about most of these AI models is that they have to be trained. At the end of the day, we humans are the ones who build them. And we can actually be reactive and make sure we have the kill switch buttons, but also we can be proactive, that we are very smart on how we build them. So a good example is what you have said. You've mentioned two examples. One is availability bias, whereby you're saying, I want to create a model for people who wear a particular type of cloth. Because the people who raise their hand are few, then you have an availability problem. Second one is selection bias, whereby you're trying to create a prediction of people who, or weather predictions for people who are going to require an umbrella, but you're using data for people who live in the desert. So exactly how you select. So we notice that you actually have multiple levers on how you can build proper AI models. And there are more than 6 different AI ethic frameworks that are there. Deontology, utilitarianism, there are multiple complex names. But they're actually there that guide you on the different development cycles. What are the things you're supposed to actually check box? So it's a checklist. So it's a framework and it tells you, check the following. Helps you even come up with ratios with regards to fitting and just checking accuracy of some of those models. So I believe as much as we are actually being reactive and knowing exactly how to stop, I think the biggest solution is how to build right. If we are actually able to build, there's one that is a deontology says, do no harm. So it's a checklist of what you're supposed to do when you're building an AI framework or a model to ensure that you do no harm. So if you're actually supposed to follow all those frameworks and do them right, I believe we'll build the right kind of AI models to ensure that we don't cause harm to the greater, wider people. I can touch about the question, that was the second question about how do you handle the deepfakes and people who are actually creating content to try and spread incorrect information or even fraudulent information. Now, I know the topic is there. I don't know how many of you have heard about Sora. How many have heard about Sora? So Sora is, you see the way we have ChatGPT, where you are actually able to write texts and it's able to generate a poem. So you say, please write me a poem. So there's one that is called Sora, built by the same company, that now generates videos. So you can tell it, please create for me a movie, a 15-second movie about a Maasai who was born and he went and fought with a lion. And it will create a movie with no cameras and nothing. It will create artificial objects, an artificial lion that looks like the real lion you know. So go and check it out. But the good thing is that when you're actually a keen eye, when you're looking at some of those videos, you will see the glitches. And people say it will get to a point whereby some of these AI models are actually going to be able to do this automatically. You won't have to have a fraudulent person trying to recreate video content. It will actually be created by bots out there. So what comes into light is the aspect of responsibility. And again, this is a proactive measure, because if you're actually building technology like Sora, then you have to have a way of tagging whatever is created as being fake. So I'm happy with the videos I saw. They actually came up with a way of tagging. You won't notice it, but if you're a techie, you'll know that they have actually tagged it electronically, and also there's a small electricity or kind of line that appears somewhere, and you're able to this is a fake video. Now, what is going to be the shift is that in the near future, we as data subjects have to actually have the power. We can't leave it to the people who are creating these tools, but we have to now get the power to now be able to control what kind of content we consume. This means that we have to actually gain knowledge on how to identify this kind of fraudulent videos. We have to be able to create platforms to call out and tag and just be able to prevent the kind of spreading of fake, deep fake videos to just propagate any kind of incorrect information.
On the misinformation question, more often than not, innovation is always ahead of regulation. And so the government will be playing catch up now in terms of AI, and will probably be miles ahead before, say, an act or regulations come into place to regulate the use of AI in Kenya. And we can't run away from misinformation. And I think the big tech companies, the Google, Twitter and the likes are able to, they have these models where they're able to detect misinformation and try and stop it in quotes. Because let's take an example of Nation. And a few weeks ago when we had that case of misinformation on the layoffs and stuff, the damage had already been done. And there was nothing much that could have been done at that point. Other than, of course, issuing the statement to clarify the same. However, if we had laws in place, let's say for misinformation or misuse of AI, then it would probably be easier to put the culprits into account or into record. Of course, we have the Kenya Computer Misuse and Cybercrime Act that is in place, and that can also be leveraged on. But I think at the end of the day, we can't work in silos. Collaboration is important. So whether it's the private sector, whether it's the public sector, we also need government, and we also need to put our input and our expertise to be able to build laws that will create a conducive environment for us to be able to derive the benefits of the benefits and opportunities of the use of AI in Kenya.
I think on misinformation, we've seen a general behavior trajectory where sometimes there's so much fake information out there. And I think for even media houses, what provides, and even companies, and even your verified site, you create a point of truth, such that many times you see something, you'll first ignore it until a particular entity posts it, then it gets properly validated. I think for me that's an opportunity that is not going anywhere, and it's a space that can be utilized, especially in the advancement of not just AI, but even misinformation.
Thank you, Rosemary. Thank you, everyone. I think maybe just to double click on what you said, Rosemary, is credibility. So yes, the credibility of a media organization such as Nation Media Group, organizations across the country and those in this room, is to really hone in on that transparency and accountability element, because you then create credibility. I think what you also touched on, Hartnell, is vigilance. And there's this delicate balance between wanting information right now and having the need to share that information quite quickly without being vigilant to check, is it real, is it not? So with that half-truth, full, would you like to say something?
Oh, I didn't want to leave out Mtembe's question.
I was just about to go to it. But yes, please go ahead in answering that. And Sharola, if you could also maybe just touch on the question, the AI for good question.
The challenge of VC and investment funds is that they spur a lot of innovation, but less of guardrails. And I'll qualify that because I see so many funds, including some friends who got some good money. Everyone got, I think it was $1 million. A couple of 5 companies, my friends, and people actually experimenting using data science and AI. The apportionment of the budget I saw, it's mostly on building models, but I didn't see anything that was touching on how to create guardrails on how we use AI. So I'm a bit worried there because the funds will always come in. We are a developing country. People see that there's actually potential in Kenya. But if we actually, as founders and people who are actually fintech directors, owners, advisors, we really cannot turn a blind eye to the aspect of creating governance and data management practices when you're dealing with AI. So as the funds come in, I cheer any startup that is actually able to innovate and create new types of AI solutions, but I also feel a bit sad when I see that in any of the solutions created, there are no guardrails on how you should manage some of these AI solutions. So it's a wake-up call. I know there's excitement about not really free, but available money, but also you're supposed to start thinking about innovation always comes with defense. So we really have to start now taking portions of the money we are getting and see exactly how we can create that guidelines, because the risks are there. All the biases we have talked about today will be found in innovative companies who are moving at the speed of light to create AI solutions. So it's just seeing exactly how do you also follow through and ensure that you're also allocating budget to have a proper data management, data governance resource in your organization to help you have the right kind of controls. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, just to add on to what Hartnell said, Mutembe, AI for good, I think it starts with us in our individual capacity as founders, as startups. You, for instance, in your organization, in your company that is developing systems and such, do you have policies in place? Do you have checks and balances? Do you have assessments that you use to ensure that maybe the systems that you're developing are ethical? Are they actually good? Do you audit yourself? Do you audit your systems before you roll them out? Do you test them? Do you ensure that what you're rolling out is good? You know, we are very young in this advent of innovation in Africa, but just as Rosemary clearly pointed out, we can make it so much better if we learn from what the West has done. We can learn from the mistakes they've made. They have taken quite a while, yet they have all the muscle, financial, infrastructure. They have all the muscle, and they have taken their time to come up with policy, with regulation. We are just starting as a continent, but it doesn't hurt to borrow a leaf and look at what the mistakes they've done, how they've handled themselves. When you look at Kenya, currently there's a bill that was taken to Parliament, and that is not something that we are ready to work with right now. We are sending it away immediately, but we can have policies in our organizations that go a long way to ensure that the AI the systems that we are rolling out are actually for good, that they encompass all the ethical grounds, and maybe may not cover everything, but goes to significantly mitigate this.
Thank you, Sharola. So I'll give my closing remarks and hand over to you panelists. It's been a very, very robust engagement. I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot all through the day. And the key takeaways for me as a person who works in a media organization is we play a role of sensitization. And that the pace at which AI is growing is astonishing. We all know that, from self-driving cars to content creation to me drafting my closing remarks using AI. It's growing fast. So let's stay vigilant. Let's contextualize everything that we're creating and keep the conversation going. Over to you, Rosemary.
I think my closing remark is that we've always had a fantastic way of leapfrogging. Using minimum amount of compute, building beautiful platforms, accessing just what we need to make good use of things. I think the fact where AI finds us at a very high level of advancement, but also a nascent level of data, puts us at a strategic advantage because we're able to build amazing, fantastic things that will solve problems for us. And I think for me, my closing remark is let's get the data basics right, the governance right. By the time we're throwing in the models, we'll have a proper leapfrog moment. Yeah.
Okay, maybe my closing remark would be, we come to summits like this. I'm sure some of us have interacted in so many speaking engagements. But at the end of the day, when you leave this place and you go back to your startup, your organization, what are you doing about what you have observed here, what you have learned here, what you have taken away from a setup, an event like this? Like, are you going to implement, or we're just waiting for the next event to discuss further about what we were unable to do in the previous, 1 year or the time that has lapsed? Let us actually go to implement. When you network in these kinds of forum, then you make sure that you're able to pick something from someone that will enable you to further, grow and develop. That is the only way in which we can actually leapfrog, as mentioned here. That is how we can have proper foundation as we are starting as a country and continent. Thank you.
For me, two statements. If you're a leader here, I would urge you to invest in skills and talents to build data analytics capability, because that is the foundation of moving now into AI and AI capabilities. And then lastly, I'll just leave you with a quote that you've probably heard, that AI will not come to steal your jobs, but the person who will learn to use AI is the one who will steal your job. Thanks.
How many have actually, when they were leaving maybe high school or campus, did computer packages? Excel. So data and AI is your new Excel. You have to go back to school and learn. The rate of change which I'm noticing out there, data is actually coming to change existing jobs. Not really by replacing them, but by organizing them to a new level. So if you talk about financial officers, risk officers, marketing officers, all of these roles are now having a very big portion of data and analytics. So you have to go back and do your packages. The information these days is actually available everywhere, from YouTube to TikTok. There are also tutorials about data on TikTok. Yeah? So make sure you actually go and start learning. Don't be left behind. The fourth industrial revolution is actually here. Thank you.
Thank you. Please join me in thanking our panelists today.
Thank you very much. Let's appreciate Lydia as well. As we draw closer to the
Thank you very much. Nation Media, all protocols observed. It's been a great pleasure to be part of this session. Actually, it's my first time for this digital summit. I think I've learned a lot of stuff when it comes to AI and actually where AI is going to take us. My case study today will be about Copilot. Most of you have heard about Copilot, Microsoft product on AI, which comes in with 365, your subscription for 365. And I'll showcase what the data says about early stages of Copilot. It came out last year, but it didn't hit the Kenyan market, or this market, until I think January this year. So there's a lot been going on. We had so many people get on board on Copilot. And we've seen so many, good responses and what people would like the version or the application to do. Before I start, just a brief intro about myself. I work for Red Dot Distribution. We are a software distributor for Microsoft, exclusively Microsoft software. We specialize on cloud applications. Most important, we do Azure applications. We sell Azure products. We support our customers. We have a regional presence in Africa, both East, Southern, and Southern Africa. We do engage in workshops, Microsoft-sponsored workshops and training sessions. We do train our partners on the products on the market, in this case, Microsoft products. So if we do get requests from partners or customers who buy from our partners who exactly buy from us. So what we do is we sell Microsoft products to partners. We can also sell directly to customers. So my presentation today, like I mentioned, will be on Copilot. We've seen a lot of changes in terms of what the tech or AI has done. Just to touch a little bit about outside of Microsoft, we know that Microsoft owns part of ChatGPT. It's an open source or open AI application. We all go in there and search for information that we get. But have you ever asked yourself, how valid is that information you get from ChatGPT? Can you verify the content? How long does it take you to get out and get the information you're looking for? So these are some of the things that Microsoft has actually looked at and tackled in terms of coming up with a more advanced generative AI tool, which works best with we all know the applications, Microsoft applications. This is Word, Excel, anything that we're used to in terms of Microsoft. So they've actually put this tool together. Now, the good thing with Copilot, you're able to verify your sources. I'm pretty sure on ChatGPT you cannot do the same thing. You're not able to verify where you get your information from. Up-to-date content. And the most important thing is that your content is protected. Your data is safe. However, you have to log in or you have to access the application using your work-assigned email or a school account for you to be able to get your data protected. Of course, they do give you a disclaimer, or they give you a warning in terms of telling you that this data is not going to be used by Microsoft, in terms of trying to improve the prompts. Your prompt is as good as your login session, so you can be rest assured nothing is being collected by Microsoft. Your session idle, maybe I think for about 3 to 5 minutes, you're automatically logged out. So you're actually forced to come back and log in again, and you're presented with a new prompt. So what can Copilot's earliest users teach us about generative AI at work? But before I go to that, we've actually seen educational institutions warming up to AI. A good example, if you've taken your studies online, I'm sure you submit your coursework, it's taken through a similarity score. Actually, these are tools that educational institutions are using to actually detect and make sure there's no any slight indication of plagiarism. However, that said, those particular tools will check your similarity score once you submit your work. However, like I said, the educational institutions are warming up to artificial intelligence and the content that we get out there. So they've just put an acceptable score of how much content you can present. They know we use AI to generate content. Of course, this is a challenge to educators and also the students themselves, because now you don't have to go out there and dig out information in terms of what you're looking for. You don't have to spend hours looking for data or trying to write your academic paper. So you have this acceptable percentage that they put out there, and they actually tell you it has to be within this particular range, because we know that you're using AI to generate this particular content. Again, coming to the way we embrace, or we've actually been able to embrace technology, let me say in this part of the world, the same technology that is being introduced to us, in this case I'm going to use Microsoft as an example, is no different than the same technology that is being used by someone else in North America, maybe in Western Europe, or anywhere else in the world except this part of the world. So you can be assured that that is the same type of technology, or maybe version of software that they're using is the same type of software that is being introduced here. Now, the biggest challenge, according to Microsoft, is why have we been so slow in embracing this technology? There is a huge gap in terms of skills. Having moved around East Africa doing workshops, of course sponsored by Microsoft, we market the products. We've seen so many countries, I've seen so many customers in countries, for example, on our neighbors. They do have laws that actually force them to have their data reside in their own country. So that makes it very difficult for us to have this particular product being used by those people in those particular countries. Again, this technology has not been taken very well. I think earlier on when 365 came out, it was rejected by Germany because they were saying they need a data center to reside in Germany for Microsoft to be able to sell any products in terms of the cloud applications. So what happened? Microsoft was forced to build a data center in Germany. I believe we can do the same thing here. We consume so much of other people's products, and we should be controlled where we say or where we choose our data should be held. So in this case, I'll use our neighbors, Tanzania. They're actually very hesitant to get these applications on board because of their data. So they say, if you cannot guarantee that our information is going to be hosted here in our region or in this country, then we're not going to take your product. So I think it's a high time that our government, moves in the same direction. We should force, or we should make these companies, it's about building confidence, knowing that our data is going to be hosted or is going to be resident in this country or in this region. Okay, sorry about that. So what can Copilot's earliest users teach about us, about generative AI at work? First look at the impact on productivity and also creativity and time. So looking at generative AI, in this case Copilot, I would ask you maybe something you can consider or maybe think about. How long does it take you to get this information that you're looking for? We spend a lot of time. We will, go through every search engine that we know of just to try and get this information. But again, the information we get, can we rely on, this information? Can we verify the content of this information? So 8 months ago, Microsoft introduced Copilot, to reduce the digital debt. So what are we saying when you talk about the digital debt? We have so much information. We have so many applications out there. So how do we know which application works best for us? So what do? We get online. If I'm trying to get a summary of a document, maybe a 300 or 150-page PDF document, I would perhaps go online and look for those free tools. But those free tools, they do give you a limit on the amount of data that you can extract from your documents or summarize in this case. So we are living in a digital debt. Technology is moving very fast. What was relevant last year is not relevant today. Again, I think it's a high time we embrace this kind of technology. Like I mentioned earlier on, it's the same technology being utilized out there. I think some of the Asian companies, countries like China, they have a competitive edge. A few years back, I had an opportunity to attend a robotics summit here in Nairobi. And they showcased some of their products. In this case, they showcased a lot of robotics applications in devices. And there's something that caught my attention. They have this one institution that they come up with curriculum and they teach kids in school about robotics. And this guy says, okay, we have this curriculum, but it's taught between grade 1 and grade 4. So it's perhaps, I would believe it's maybe the same thing we have here in our new education system. So between grade 1 and 4, they have to take this exam that will actually advance them to the next level. And the exam is strictly on robotics. So we're talking about kids between the age of maybe 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. Comparing that and what we have in this in our environment or this region, we're pretty much struggling to keep up, with this technology. Most of us have not come, to accept it, just to find out exactly what is AI, generative AI, what it can do. I know for a fact, that Amazon has an AI-powered store. There is no attendant, nothing. All you do is walk in, pick what you want, and you walk out. And it's actually being taken out of the credit card. So can we say that is a form of replacing employment? Because they actually have this store specifically. It just started as an example to show you how AI can, can be used to make things easier in this case. So they have this store, walk in. Once you walk in, you have your card actually, lets you in. You pick whatever you want, and you walk out. So you don't have to, worry about, having to pay. I saw a clip a few years back that the US is training robots. The next battlefield is not human. They have these guys out there, the robots, they'll do all the fighting for them. And this is because of the fatalities, they get during the wars. So it's very important that we think about this digital debt that you're experiencing. It's growing day by day, and we need to find ways of doing something about it. Microsoft has these programs we run. These are workshops we train, and they also provide content that you can, get online, free content, where you can get online, train yourself. They have Copilot has a studio, Copilot Studio, where you can create your own Copilot. Generative AI, depending on your environment or what data that you hold in your organization. So a first look across research, and actually this is what stood out. We have 70% of Copilot users say they were more productive, and 68 said it improved the quality of their work. Assuming you have, again, maybe a 300-page PDF document, you need to summarize it. How would you summarize it? That's a lot of data for you to work with. So here comes in Microsoft Copilot. That gives you the ease, and you can be rest assured your data is not being shared by Microsoft. Like I mentioned earlier on, your prompt is as good as your login. You have an idle session of about 5 minutes. You're forced to log in again, so you cannot get that content. Overall users were 29% faster in a series of tasks, searching, writing, and also summarizing. I personally use this for emails, for documents that I need to submit. However, when you're using generative AI, when you're writing content, and you want to post or you want to publish this content on Google, search engines do have an algorithm now that actually will detect any form of AI-generated content, and they'll actually flag it. So I would say that we have not 100% moved to AI or generative AI, leaving everything to AI, but, they give us this percentage that you have to work with. So search engines expect you to, to have a human touch to the content that you provide out there, or it's going to be flagged as generated by AI. So users were able to get caught up on missed meetings nearly 4 times faster. Now, this comes into place when you use Microsoft Teams. Once you get your Copilot license, you can integrate it with, get your Teams working as well. You can attend 2 meetings in the same time. Again, on Microsoft Teams, you can have 10,000 participants in one session, but only have 1,000 of them actively involved in that particular session. So you can have Copilot summarize your meeting, give you a report. If there's any discussion touching on you as a participant, it gives you a report on which the key items or stuff that you need to do because you attended that session. It doesn't have a time limit in terms of how long you can have your session. So that's something I think you should look at. 64% of users say Copilot helps them spend less time processing emails. Copilot does a very good job. You wake up in the morning, 350 emails. Where do you start? Who sent you the email? You first look at what time this email came in. I was perhaps asleep, so I'm not supposed to be working. So you maybe want to not look at that email. So here comes you.